What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the third and final part of this series on the philosophy of truth. If you have watched the intro, the first part, the second part, and now this part, thank you so much. I hope you've learned something, and if not, then, well, if you haven't learned something, why? Dude, oh my god, I cannot think today. I just hit record and I can't help. What I'm trying to say is I hope you learned something, and if you didn't, then I'm not sure why you've watched all the videos in this series, or this might be the first video in this series that you've watched, and if that's the case, welcome. This might not make a whole lot of sense unless you go back and see the other ones, so I will put a link to the first part of the video up here, or the intro, one of those, and so check them out. So in the first part of the series, as some of you know, we talked about the problems of truth and why it's an issue to get to the actual truth and what is the actual objective truth. And in the second part, we talked about the theories on how to arrive at said absolute truth, or the objective truth, or just truth in general. How do we know what is truth and what is truth? And hopefully in that part you learned not just what you believe, hopefully you already knew what you believe, but how you came to believe what you believe, and if it was fault, if it was fallacy, and if there's cracks in those beliefs and you realize, wait a minute, I'm just like using coherence theory, and it's actually a very, I don't even know what accent that was. Oh my God, help. You may have found that you were going about truth in a very subjective way, and you weren't actually believing absolute truth, but you were just believing whatever cohered with your current belief system. Oh my God. I feel like I have some sort of disorder because this happens in every single video where I just constantly trip over my words. Maybe it's because I made fun of my sister doing it for years and this is just karma. It probably is. So anyway, in this third and final part in this series, I'm going to attempt to wrap all of it up into one coherent thought for myself and for you, just to make sense of it all and how we can actually use all that we've just learned in this series to arrive at truth and to discover what actually is truth. And honestly, I got to admit, when first starting to study for this series on truth, I started to freak out a little bit because as I started studying, I said, is truth even a thing? Like I just started freaking out because of everything that I was seeing and like, oh my God, is truth just this made up concept that we've made? Like, is postmodernism the way to go? We're just consensus, what everybody says is true. Is that what we've all deemed as truth? And I just started to kind of freak out a little bit, but I'm good now. I've calmed down, so everything's good. But after doing all these studies and after giving it a lot more thought, I found exactly what I was looking for in all of these studies and theories with all the study of the theories of truth. I feel like I got to the point that I was trying to get to. So in order to get that point, let me rewind and go back to the original question at hand. What is truth? Well, basically, in short, truth is what can be seen as the objective feature to the proposition, and it is not a subjective one. It's funny that I have to make that distinction because so many people, they'll use that argument, well, it's true for me, but that's not objective truth. So with talking about propositions of truth, just saying, here's a proposition I'm giving that this could be the truth. When we look at propositions through Tarski's theory of truth, we realize that every proposition possible has not yet been made, or we are not aware of every proposition that could possibly be made. And I know that can sound confusing, but it makes more sense when I also say that it is possible that we don't know truth and that we have not proposed actual objective truth because nobody even knows what the proposition is yet. And so nobody's even proposed this could actually be the truth. So with the possibility that we haven't even proposed truth yet, how do we find what truth actually is? Well, truth is what arises out of the relationship between the proposition that's given and the way that the world actually is. And I think it's the relationship between conversation and between being able to compare and measure truth values in things that show us that truth is a conversation. Truth is a journey. It's a conversation and a journey rather than just a single proposition that's made. And I say that because philosophers like Tarski and others have tried to build this philosophical machine or come up with a single equation that shows us this is exactly how you arrive at truth in every single situation, in every single language, no matter what. This is the equation of how you arrive at truth. And all of them have failed. So there was actually a man named Kurt Gödel, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. He came along with his first incompleteness theorem. His theorem said that any formal language that we have, that we can come up with propositions of truth, there must also be a way in that language to describe something that can't be derived from that language. It makes sense in my head, but I know that's confusing to other people. Basically, any language that we have, formal language, that gives a proposition, there must also be a way in that given formal language to derive another proposition that is outside of that language. Because if there's nothing to compare that truth proposition to, and how do we know the truth value of it? It can't be given a truth value if there is nothing to compare it to. Because then truth would only be applied to that language that the proposition was in and no other global language. And this theorem is what shows that the concept of truth transcends that of proof in any formal language, in any grammatical language. That you can word it exactly how you want it to. You can word the proposition exactly for it to make sense and be coherent and simplified and everything. But if that's different than another systematic language, another formal language, then that truth is only applied in that language. It doesn't apply on a universal scale. So any one formal language cannot contain a global, universal truth value in itself, which is why Alfred Tarski created his semantic theory of truth. And if you're unaware of that, then click up here to part 2 and you can learn about it. So with all that being said, and looking again at the overall theme of everything that I've said thus far, truth, the only absolute truth, is that truth is not absolute. Truth is a conversation. It's a journey. But that's not to say that truth isn't objective, because I still do think it is. Like, something that didn't make it into this truth series that I might talk more about in vlogs is the difference between realism and anti-realism. I know I mentioned it in my past video on this series, but the difference is a big difference, but it really matters which one you are for how you interpret truth. Because I would consider myself a realist, which means that truth is objective from my experience of it. You know, reality around me doesn't depend on my experience. There is objective reality, and it is independent from my mind in the way that I think. It's its own thing. If I existed or not, reality would still exist. Anti-realism, however you want to say it, is the exact opposite. It says that reality only exists because I experience it. And, you know, so basically what I experience is truth, is reality, because reality wouldn't exist if I didn't exist. So yeah. And so depending on which one of those you fall under, whether you're an anti-realist or a realist, that has a lot to say with how you come up with truth, your absolute truth or your concept of truth. It's a very important thing to think about really when you're deciding, okay, what is truth and what truth do I like? Because if you're an anti-realist, the truth is that it'll be subjective to you. But if you're a realist, then you're searching for objective truth, something outside of yourself. So another aspect to think about with anti-realism, which if you notice yourself doing this, then you could be an anti-realist. So with anti-realism, truth is constrained by the ability to verify, which means that the truth is constrained by knowledge. And if we can verify it and we have knowledge about it, then that's what makes it truth. But like I said, I would consider myself a realist, and I don't think that's, is it weird if I say truth? I think there are truths objectively that we are not aware of and that we do not have knowledge of. So that's why I don't agree with that. So anyway, getting back to the topic of talking about what is truth, typically I study these things for the series that I do on this channel. I study them until I feel like I can speak in meta language what exactly the object language is, what exactly, like I can translate what exactly is the core of this theory, or I can describe it in my own words, simplify it, and I really have a grasp on how to talk about it. And I feel like with this series on truth, I've arrived at that point, but at the same time, I'm far from it. And I say that because normally in philosophy, things are pretty cut and dry, which I know like contradicts what philosophy is. But normally it's something that I can look up and I can study, and it's just like, okay, this is what it is. I either think like that or I don't think like that. I either agree with it or don't agree with it. And it's pretty cut and dry. Like I just feel like I can get a strong grip on it and a handle on it and saying, all right, this is definitely the way that I side with in my thinking with philosophy. But with this series on truth, honestly, I feel anything but that. I mean, I'm learning more and more that truth is messy, and it is so open to interpretation, it's almost scary. Not scary, but it's scary how people can arrive at truth logically, but also that could logically be a lie. So it's like, what foundational belief or knowledge do I have that it's actually a lie? It could cause mental and emotional discomfort is what I'm saying. So no one theory of truth is correct, which is typical in philosophy, but with the philosophy of truth, it means that maybe not even the truth is correct. So what I thought was absolute truth through this study has significantly changed, to say the least. The more I study these theories and the more I think about these theories, I realize that truth is best found in context. And that's really the only absolute truth when it comes to truth, which is why I say that truth is a conversation. It's best found in a journey. So again, I really feel like the only absolute truth is that there is no absolute truth. But at the same time, I do feel like there is objective absolute truth, but I think that we haven't even found it yet. We haven't even proposed it yet. Or maybe we have, and it's just super ambiguous, because the truth can be ambiguous, and it's all open to interpretation. Help. Now, if you didn't catch that from what I just said, not about interpretation, but that the only absolute truth is that truth is not absolute, that's actually a liar's paradox, which we talked about in the first part of this series. And which leads to the question, is truth a paradox? Can what we think is truth be both true and false, despite the fact that it can be a paradox and it defies the laws of logic? Honestly, I'd say yes and no, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but let me explain. Like I said, I would consider myself a realist and also a pragmatist, not necessarily with the pragmatic theory of truth, although I do really enjoy that, and I do really like using that theory in my personal life. So knowing that, I do believe that there is absolute truth in physics and in science and the things of like, this is how the world works, the science of the universe, if you will. But I don't think truth is absolute and concrete when it comes to psychology, when it comes to relationships, when it comes to love, when it comes to emotions and how we feel. I don't think some of those subjective things, I think the truth can differ from different contexts and from situation to situation. And that leads me back again, like I said, that I think truth is best discovered in context. So I still believe in truth, and I still believe that there is absolute truth, but I think truth is absolute in the most abstract way, which is really completely contradictory to how I thought about truth prior to this study of the philosophy of truth. Now, in regards to developing one cohesive thought of the different theories of truth, now I hinted about it at the end of the last part in this series of this philosophy called pluralism, where you don't necessarily subscribe to one individual theory of how you arrive at truth, but you look in context. Like in things of science, you might find it best to use the correspondence theory, and of things in relationships, you might find it best to use the coherence theory. And it varies from situation to situation, but you don't have to subscribe to any one theory of truth. I think it's necessary, and I think people absolutely should use different theories of truths depending on where they're at in life and depending on how they're trying to measure the truth value of a given statement. And I think this is necessary, and this is something that everyone should adopt, because if it can get super dangerous, like I talked about, like if you use the coherence theory for everything in life, that can get you in a load of trouble, and your foundation will more than likely start developing more lies, and you'll just be founded upon lies sooner or later, rather than any absolute truth at all. So yeah, I mean, I'm basically repeating myself now, but no one theory is the correct theory, and I think everyone, when talking about the philosophy of truth and the theories of it, should look at all of it and say, look at all of it and be a pluralist, or use the philosophy of pluralism. There, I got it. So basically, I have a lot more of thoughts about truth and about how to arrive at truth. And I'll probably talk about it more in some follow-up vlogs to this, because really, the way that I thought about truth prior to these studies is you have subjective truth and objective truth. And I thought that was just common sense, and that's the way that everyone thought about it. But then as I study the philosophy of truth, I didn't see those terms at all. I mean, you see them, you see subjective and objective, but you don't see them like subjective truth, objective truth. And I think that that's probably a simpler way of thinking about these things. So I'll be talking about more of that in future vlogs. But if you haven't already noticed, down in the description, I posted all the links to all of the essays that I used in my research to this whole series on the philosophy of truth. So if you want to learn more, if you want to dive even deeper than what I did, then head down into the description, have at it. Have fun. So that is the series on the philosophy of truth. I really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something, and I hope you learned through all of this, not just how to arrive at truth and know what you believe and know what your truth is, but also how to question your truth. And so leave a comment down below of what you think of this video and what you think of this series. Please like, subscribe, and share. And more to come, so I'll see you misfits in the next one. Peace! I got that summer